Hey there, everyone. Welcome into CMS Connected here on thepulsenetwork.com. I'm your host, Tyler Pyburn. Glad you guys could join us. This is the web content management industry's only news commentary show. And today we've got another great show lined up for you today. We are going to be discussing how you can better aligning your organization for good web governance. That's the topic of discussion. Kind of taking us through this path, of course, as always, my co-host, Scott Lewer, President Principal Analyst at Digital Clarity Group. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. So we've had this conversation a little while ago. Things have changed, though, over the course of the last year, really, though, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot. I mean, a lot has changed. But in terms of this conversation being related to governance, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot. And a lot has come up. We actually had Lisa on last year as well. Yep. And a lot has happened with her, too, right? Because she's in the midst of about to put out a big book. So she's done a lot of her own thinking. I mean, she's been an expert in this field for a long time. But to go through the book writing process and have to find some succinct points are, really pretty, it's an important revolution for her. So I'm anxious to hear from her, too.
For sure, no question about that. And as Scott mentioned, Lisa Welchman of Welchman Pierpoint is going to be joining us momentarily here on the show on CMS Connected. We also are going to be joined by Brian Ruby from CMS Report, and he'll actually be reviewing Bridgeon's IApps for in the Spotlight segment. So we're going to be taking you through quite a few different things today, but of course we always have to acknowledge our CMS Connected sponsors who really make this entire show happen. First off, we have to acknowledge Falcon Software. Now, Falcon provides creative design, e-commerce, web content management, social and mobile solutions for organizations across the globe, as well as Digital Clarity Group. DCG is a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. Now, I also would like to go ahead and recommend that if you're planning on selecting a web content management solution, make sure to download the white paper that's located just below this player. Don't read it just yet, but as I always say, make sure download it now. Read it after the show. That way you'll be able to go through everything yourselves at that point in time. So let's kind of kick things off today. Let's get right to it, jump in. Let's start things off with the news. The very first thing we want to go ahead and talk about is Accenture buying Acuity Group. Now, last week's announced acquisition of Acuity Group by Accenture. Impressive in both the dollar amount as well as kind of the surprise value as well. Now, according to Tim Walters of Digital Clarity Group, it's merely a high-profile manifestation of the changes racking the service provider landscape as they reposition to support customer experience management. Your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so Acuity Group.
Acuity Group, my apologies.
Yeah, no problem. Acuity Group is a Chicago-based digital marketing firm, essentially an e-commerce firm, right? Mm-hmm. So they work a lot on the technical side. They work with products like Adobe and with Sitecore and a few others, and they help to build these digital experiences for companies and build their digital commerce solutions as well. Yeah, it's interesting. I think they had $142 million in sales in 2012, in revenue, sorry, in 2012. Mm-hmm. And the valuation was, they paid $316, so $141 million revenue last year, $316 million valuation, which is more than 2x, which is very significant in the services space. I mean, typically to get more than 1.5x is 1.5x would be a really good valuation.
I was going to say, we see this from time to time again in the consumer space when they're buying technology, things of that nature, but not from this area of interest. What's the reasoning for it in particular, do you think?
So, so Tim writes in that piece, and our kind of view, and by the way, this is near and dear to our heart, right? Because at Digital Clarity Group, we're doing a lot of focus. We really think that as much as many analysts tend to focus on the technologies, while certainly that's relevant, we really feel like it's important to be focusing both in the selection process and just for us to be evaluating what we call service providers in the space, so the agencies and the systems integrators. So we're talking, Tim refers to this, Tyler, as the CEM imperative, essentially, where we're basically saying the customer experience management becomes the emphasis of all of this, that really we're saying it is the necessity to integrate all these various technologies along with a strategy and a solution to be able to create this kind of audience of one experience for your customer. So whether your customer is an external prospective buyer, or you're in a B2B marketplace, or you are, if that customer even is an internal employee and it's about engaging employees, this whole notion of the empowered consumer and trying to create an environment where you're able to tailor your offering in a way that's kind of most relevant to them is what we're saying is most significant. significant here about this. And so the role that the agency plays, right, before it was just kind of a lot of technology. If you could piece it together, that was the play. And that's what, by the way, Accenture was, right? Accenture was this kind of suit and tie company that would come in, and they typically catered mostly to the CIO and the CTO, and they would do lots of development. And so now to bring in an Acuity Group, and oh, by the way, they just made, what was the name of the firm? It started with an F. They just recently bought Fjord, like just a couple of weeks ago. A London-based firm. It was a creative company. So here they buy a creative company, they buy this interactive agency, and now it's basically they're saying,
we piece it together?
We are here to combat the, the Razorfishes of the world and the other kind of more traditional agency space, and saying we're bringing our technical prowess to the marketer to be able to kind of piece these solutions together for them.
And become that one-step shop.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what I think the goal is, as opposed to we'll handle this and we'll outsource everything else. We have it all under one roof. And we've seen it. It seems to be more of a need for that now too, isn't it?
It is, and it's happening from both sides, right? So we're seeing a company like a Razorfish build a platform called Fluent, where they went out and got the technology prowess, and actually based on it's on Adobe's basis, but they built this whole environment there called Fluent to provide some of this digital marketing capabilities, the technical capabilities, where Razorfish was traditionally much more known as a creative agency and a marketing agency, a branding agency. We also saw Sapient doing basically the same thing. They've put out a solution called Fusion, which is much very similar as well. WPP has one. It's another F word, but sorry, F word, but Fabric, I think is what they called it. Yeah. So it's happening where there's a lot of these kind of digital agencies continuously coming kind of into the IT side, but Accenture was going the other way. They're basically saying we're going to go get the agency side of the house and bring it in. And Deloitte did the same thing not very long ago. They went and acquired a firm and they created this Deloitte Digital. So same sort of thing. So I think we're seeing it happen from both sides, and where we've talked always on this show traditionally about kind of the collusion of vendors where they're coming together and being bought, and we're seeing a lot of that happen. Now it's happening in the agency space a lot. It's always happened where they were buying, but they were buying more like-minded.
One way or another, they were doing it.
It was more like WPP, but filling their portfolio with a whole bunch of other agencies underneath. This is the case where you're seeing interactive come in line with the kind of IT side and the creative and the IT coming together, I think. So we're seeing a lot more of that.
Interesting. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on. We've got some breaking news actually to go ahead and bring to you the table today here on CMS Connected. Actually, on May 21st, the producer of CMS Connected, Gary Eisenstein, he actually had a phone interview with Marcy Maddox, who of OpenText. You've also seen her here on CMS Connected as well, about the rebirth of their Vignette platform. Now, Vignette, once a leader in the ECM space, was actually purchased by OpenText back in 2009. Plans of incorporating it into the entire architecture of the entire platform itself. Instead, we haven't really heard too much about it since 2009. In the latter half of 2011, actually, after OpenText had a deep dive into what their customers were looking for and the industry was going, they actually decided to rebuild or rebrand Vignette with a focus on mobile, social, cloud, big data, so on and so forth. So here's Marcy's quote about this. OpenText's new ECM offering enables organizations to exceed their customers' online expectations. Newly designed interface for savvy content marketing needs, OpenText WEM is the application of choice for the ubiquitous management of information across all organizational boundaries. Transform everyday online transactions across languages or devices into actionable, strategic insight, responsive design, compelling experiences, omni-channel delivery. Scott, you actually also had, recent conversation with OpenText about the rebirth of Vignette. We haven't really heard much of it. What's kind of your take on this?
Yeah, I think a couple of things are happening here. Let's take one step back, which is more of the rebirth of OpenText, I think is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
OpenText for a long time was no bones about it. They were the ones who were kind of this top-line company that would come in and they would buy up these other smaller vendors that were in a particular stage of their life cycle, these products, and they would essentially milk maintenance revenue for a long time, right? And now that was there was no bones about it. They were not trying to integrate them necessarily. They might have said it a little bit in their marketing, but they were really not trying to piece these solutions together. They were really just that was their products, their revenue strategy. Now with Berenshea is his last name. I can't remember his first name. Mark, I think. Berenshea, the new CEO who came in about this time last year, has had a taken the company in a completely new direction, where they're really trying to say, let's sunset some products that don't make sense in our portfolio, let's raise the face of some of the other ones, and let's cull these things together in order to make a kind of a more of a unified solution for our customers. And so he also then was the same person that brought in Kevin Cochran, who we talked about this just a couple of months ago as the new CMO. And Kevin has always wanted to. That's right, who came over from Adobe, thanks. And so I think, and certainly Kevin's mindset has always been about how he's going to pull things together, not just from a marketing standpoint, but he's always had a big role in product. So I think here, now, Kevin had nothing to do with what's happened with Vignette to this point. I mean, this has been an incubation for the last 2.5 years, right? So give credit where it's due. This was not a Kevin doing by any means. But it just goes to show, I think what I've seen from them, and I spent some time down in Austin in the Vignette headquarters within OpenText, and they talk a lot about EIM, Enterprise Information Management. I've never loved that term. I told them I don't love that term. It just rings, ECM. It's just kind of old sounding to me. But regardless, the whole point, I don't know what else I'd call it though, because the idea is about how to pull all these pieces that they have that support the organization within inside. They have a lot of records management stuff, enterprise content management things. They bought the Einstein search product a while ago, which is all about semantic search. And then they had Vignette and they had Red Dot here, right? And so how do you weave all that together? Vignette is kind of the first this relaunching of this EIM 8.5, I think they're calling it now, is really the first place where they basically said, here, we're going to release and show you our new interface, which by the way is pretty impressive. I think we're going to review it next month, as a matter of fact. It's going to be in the Spotlight product next month. Very impressive look on it, really nice looking, completely new. The underlying architecture is completely changed, and so I think people will be frankly kind of excited about it.
Definitely. All right, well, we're going to go. We got to move on. The essence of time. Great story for sure. So what I want to do is move on. Let's talk about Autonomy, because the $10.4 billion acquisition of UK-based Autonomy by HP has been, undoubtedly one of the biggest talks of the town, so to speak, at this point in time. Now, unfortunately, the discussion has been focused largely on allegations of corporate malpractices. It's been kind of fueled by some of these things in the background. What I want to talk about specifically is, the intelligent data operating layer server technology is the muscle, really, right now, Scott, but behind the products that everyone can see. It's not really what Autonomy is marketing at this point in time. Most of the income generated by Autonomy, Scott, is from information governance, in a sense.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I think that's interesting. So it's called IDLE, is the kind of short name for what most people refer to it, and it was Autonomy search product. That's kind of that is what they were known for. I think the interesting part because we're a content management show, is the emphasis, or rather kind of lack of emphasis, on Interwoven, which was the product that Autonomy bought for a long time. It sat within their portfolio for a while and really didn't get much attention, kind of frustratingly. For a while, as an analyst, I watched that, and I was even a hardcore implementer of Autonomy, of Interwoven at one point. And I think I was disappointed at how little they integrated it with IDLE. I actually thought the fusion between the capabilities of search and of web content management, or of content management, are significant in terms of what they can do and how they can move the whole industry forward. And they really didn't do much of that at all. And so even when they're talking today about, when they're talking about kind of how they're going to move forward and integrate things into HP, they're still only, though, talking about IDLE, and not really much. We haven't really heard much about Interwoven and what they're specifically going to do with that. So my worry from us being a content management show is less about what's happening with IDLE and more about what's happening with Interwoven, which is the product that Autonomy bought, ignored, now HP bought, and is kind of also trying to ignore, I feel like. So that's my question for them. Yeah, so I wrote up a little thing, and when I did that Forrester Wave review, I kind of gave some criticism there to HP about how they haven't really done anything with that move,
and that it's swept under the rug.
Yeah, right. And that it's their stepchild, their redheaded stepchild, kind of a little bit. And they called me out personally in an email. They wanted to know, why in the world would I say that? And so I said, well, listen, show me how I'm wrong, and I've yet to have them come in and brief me and tell me how many wonderful moves they've made with the product.
Open invitation. Join us here on CMS Connected.
Yeah, I think
that's would love to have you on. Would love to have that discussion right here on the show. So I'll throw that out there. Gary, let's make that happen. All right, let's move on. We want to go ahead and let's talk about Jive, the collaboration and communication hub in the enterprise cloud. Now, is Jive now that piece? Now, on April 23rd, Jive Software actually unveiled its most innovative technology to date in the spring cloud release. With the release, organizations can create virtual workspaces with Jive called Purposeful Places that deeply integrate with Salesforce.com and Box to help sales team close deals faster, marketing departments build more effective campaigns. The same stuff we hear from every single company out there saying that they do. Now, the CEO of Jive Software said this, quote, "It's time we reimagine productivity and break out of old systems like email that bog us down. With these new capabilities, including bidirectional integration with Box, Salesforce.com, and Chatter, Jive is the collaboration and communication hub in the enterprise cloud." Is it, Scott? Is Jive now the collaboration communication hub in the enterprise cloud?
I mean, I don't know if it's the, but I think they've made
one of the.
Sure, certainly one of the, maybe the. But the point is I think some of the moves that they've made are really interesting and really good. I just mentioned earlier that when we're talking about this, managing the customer experience, and I said the customer can be an internal employee. This kind of employee-oriented systems of engagement are really important. And so how we kind of fuel and help employees collaborate with each other and communicate with each other is starting to get some good critical mass now. And what Jive has done here is they've taken it a little bit step further, such that the social enterprise is no longer just about how can you enable water cooler chat, digitally. That's not what it is. It's about getting work done. And they've taken the step here where they've done some integration with Box, some integration with Salesforce, and they've created what they call these purposeful places, which I hate the name, but like what else? Unpurposeful, like I don't
say
know,
versus what exactly?
Yeah, but they give an example of the deal room. So this is a perfect example. The deal room is a place where if you think about how many people have to come together when you're in the sales process, right? So you've got information and data about a prospective company that you're targeting from Salesforce.com, right? You've got RFPs and documents that have to be created. There's a lot of usually email back and forth of people weighing in and doing track changes within Word and all that kind of stuff. So they're collaborating around a document. And then you've got a lot of other folks that are like, maybe legal gets involved, maybe marketing gets involved, a number of other people who typically might not have access to Salesforce.com. They're not playing in that place anymore. So this is now a place where in Jive, you can all come together, have access to that information that's coming in from Salesforce.com, have those documents available, do all that collaboration, and that's an example of how they kind of take collaboration and make it be, and put it around an actual business process.
Excellent.
So I think it's very neat. I think what they've done is really neat. They announced a relationship with Box now, where some of those documents and things that are in Box, you can do this now around campaigns as well. And I think they've got like 25.
Well, they work hand in hand. I mean, how often from an agency side do you go ahead and you look at that and say, okay, I want to make sure that all my documents that are now, I mean, we're seeing PowerPoint presentations, with video and that. We need to make sure that we can apply that to what's taking place and being able to move it over to Salesforce as well so we can funnel everything through.
That's right. So it's not creating like a new destination for people to start getting work in another place. It is instead saying, we know you guys were working here, we know you guys were working here, let's bring the power of what you're doing together, but still allow you to stay in your old kind of siloed places. So I think it's really neat what they've done. And essentially a lot of folks were already kind of integrating Box and Jive and whatever, but now they've productized that a bit more, and they've created a new API layer as well to encourage even more of this. So Box and Salesforce, I think, are just two of the first examples, and they'll have a number of other ones. So yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
Excellent. All right, so the very next story that we're going to go ahead and jump to right now, the last story in the entire news segment, is focused solely around DrupalCon. And Scott, I'm going to go to you on this in just a few seconds, because you were at DrupalCon for the past few days, and not only announced the new features in Drupal 8, which that's where a lot of people are talking about, and a lot of folks are discussing right now. But quite a bit of controversy was actually stirred up by their announcement of new inline editing capabilities, which are nice, but two of their most popular sessions railed against inline editing since it made multi-channel management much, much more difficult. So, Scott, as I mentioned, you were there. Talk about this a little bit more. Talk about the releases, because I know that's what everybody's actually focused in on.
Yeah, exactly. It was, first of all, it was the first time that I ever went to DrupalCon, and it was a huge show. I think around 3,500 people or so. So a really big show, really big outpouring, in a great venue. Portland was great. It was too rainy for my taste, but nonetheless. So they did announce, so we'll talk about the controversy. I think a couple of things to start out first with is they made some great announcements about what's coming in the Drupal 8 product release. So they talked about a big emphasis on mobile, so both in terms of having responsive design within the editorial environment, as well as its capability on some of the themes and things that would be produced outpouring, so it's much more mobile friendly now, which I think is important, especially in this day and era. Globalization and multilingual was another big emphasis. And then there was this whole release of the line capabilities, such that we see this in a lot of the commercial products now, where you can actually have a website page up, and within that website page, it's kind of like a preview version of the site, and you can just literally, if you've got the right privileges, stick your cursor right in there, make edits or add a story kind of within the context of the web page, right? It's called inline editing. Yeah. And so they launched this for the first time. That's coming out in 8. I think it's a part of it's called Spark, I think is the new kind of. So that got a lot of cheers, and Dries announced that on day one, and kind of everybody was waiting for that. And I think Drupal tends to get a lot of it's not the easiest system to use in the whole world. And we've seen the Adobes and Sitecores and SDLs and all these other ones all come up with this inline editing, and in demos, it's wonderful. Everybody just kind of goes gaga over it as you've got more kind of marketers and things that are in the room. But it caused a little bit of controversy.
Really?
Yeah. So they had Karen. So I actually.
I was going to say, you were there, so you
I
have to
was
give
there.
the entire story.
And I came in late. I actually didn't see Dries' presentation live. I watched a video of it later that day. They were really great. They got the videos of the keynotes and stuff right up on the site immediately. You can go and see that now if you go to the DrupalCon website. So he announces this, and then they had, for the keynote on the second day, they had Karen McGrane speak. And Karen is a friend of mine. She's a content strategist. She's great. She's wrote a great book on mobile use of the web for mobile by a Book Apart. I think the name is wrong there, but look up Karen McGrane from the Book Apart. Matter of fact, I introduced her, and in her keynote. She basically, if you know what you're getting when you ask Karen McGrane to speak, you know that she's going to rail. She also recently wrote a post called YZWTF. So we call WYSIWYG.
WYSIWYG, yeah.
W, what you see is what you get. Spell that out, right? Is the typical way of how do you, do a website and avoid having to do tagging and stuff. And she wrote WYSIWTF. So what you see is what the F, and which is a pretty funny article. But she went on to kind of basically say that same thing, that when you are dumbing it down so far that the marketer who doesn't know anything about HTML or content management can just merely edit in the same way that they do a document, which was intended for print, that as nice as that sounds, we are actually disabling their ability to be more omni-channel. We talk about the web is not the only channel now. It's for mobile. It's for all these other outputs and these channels. And what we've also said is this notion that content has always taken on, content managers always taken on, a separation of content from presentation. So it's that you write it this way, and it can be produced and created everywhere. Well, the more that we get towards inline editing, the more that you're thinking as an author, as a web author, only about the construct of that particular web page. So you're back into this mindset that we were trying to get out of, which is, how is this going to look and act and everything in this particular web page, even though it's going to be viewed on mobile sites and everywhere else. And so she's basically railing against the idea of going inline when that was the biggest feature that they were announcing. So she did that, and I saw some of the folks afterward who were just like, wow, kind of mesmerized, like as if they didn't realize that was going to happen. And there were 2 other presentations that I went to, one by Jeff Eaton and another one by Relly, and they basically said the same thing. So, but those were really heavily attended and got lots of applause, yet it flew in the face of the biggest innovation that they had made in Drupal 8.
We're going to go ahead and move on. We're going to have some, from news. It's the main topic of the show itself. Today, we are in fact going to be discussing web governance indeed. So, What is web governance? That seems to be the question that everybody is really trying to answer right now. Lisa Welchman of Welchman Pierpoint is going to be joining us in just a few seconds. Some have a very, very broad idea of web governance that, well, might include operational and production-related business processes. Some think of it as the rules related to, well, other things like web content management, but not web applications development. Lisa Welchman from Welchman Pierpoint feels web governance is something very distinct and should be examined away from all the noise of website production and web team management. With that said, we have to welcome Lisa into the show right now. Welcome back. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing very well. Great to have you back for sure. You great guest last time, so
great.
Definitely excited to have you back for sure. So with that in mind, how do we define it? What is web, or should we say digital governance at this point in time?
Well, I like to say digital governance. I was saying web governance for a while, but most of the folks that I work with are also including social and mobile and sometimes email in that whole vein. So I like to say digital governance now, and it really is about ensuring that there's proper stewardship of your online activities. So I like to make an analogy between that and to say the operations, the way that a board of directors might work for an institution, right? So they actually oversee and make sure that it's functioning within the bounds of the law, in the best interests of the organization, doing what it's supposed to do. So that's what the governing mechanism does. It makes sure that there's proper stewardship in there. And there are a number of different components to that. One of them is making sure that you're being strategic about it, so making sure that there is a digital strategy and understanding who in the organization is responsible for defining that strategy. Another piece is making sure that you've addressed the full set of policy and that you know who in your organization is actually responsible for writing policy. The same for standards. And then the really big one is the structure and shape of your digital team. How do you do work inside your organization? Where are those people? Do you have an outsource model? Is it all inside? Is it all in marketing? Is it IT? And what do those areas functionally do inside the organization? So if you push that all together, then you've got a digital governance framework, and you've kind of got a blueprint for how things ought to work inside the organization.
So that's, I would imagine, or I know, that that it's not necessarily so common to have this concerted team all working together like this. I mean, there are many organizations that don't really have a concerted effort in digital governance, like you say. So why is it so important, or what's going to be the difference between one who doesn't have this kind of there versus the effect of when somebody's kind of got this down?
Well, I think the biggest piece is being able to be intentional about what you're doing and being able to be in operational control of your digital presence, whether that's your websites or social channels. So if you don't have mature digital governance inside your organization, usually debating all the time about things, you're spending a lot of cycles. As it relates to content management systems, I've been in a lot of environments where folks want to try and re-platform the entire organization from 6 disparate systems to one particular CMS, and they can't do it because they actually don't have authority to make certain business units or aspects of the business align and do that. So governance sort of clears all of that up and allows people to be, if they want, agile, right? You can't really be agile if you're constantly debating about who gets to decide the homepage design, right? So the difference is being able to be intentional and effective versus maybe getting lucky sometimes with certain projects and just spending a lot of cycles and debating.
Yeah. I know I used to manage control the website for a really large hotel chain. And we used to call it like Fifth Avenue was the real estate of the homepage that was just constantly being bombarded. Like, I get my piece up there, I get my piece. Like, this helps to avoid that, or? Right.
Well, I always laugh because people debate about the homepage so much, and probably it's not the most trafficked webpage on the site in the first place. But yes, it does calm down those battles. And when I was mentioning the 4 aspects of strategy, policy, digital team, and standards. Standards are really key to this. Usually when we go inside an organization, what we see are people debating about who gets to decide what standards are, right? So what colors are we using? What font size? What's the tone and editorial voice? What content management system do we use? Everyone thinks that they have authority in those areas because no one's actually ever specified who does, right? So a more mature approach to governance would be saying, look, these people are the ones who get to decide design and editorial standards. These are the people that pick technology systems.
That's right.
So every time you're in a project, you don't have to just, constantly be figuring out who gets to decide
right.
and having meeting after meeting. You can just kind of get to the requirement set and move forward.
I was going to say, I mean, one of the things that I believe we actually talked about last time you were on, we talked about having too many people having their hands in the pot in a sense, is that, you know, not one person or not one team in particular is in fact making that decision, right? I mean, it's kind of a collaborative effort and no one really is too terribly sure how to do that. Talk about some of the other issues that might come up when, you know, we're trying to implement or trying to make sure that web governance is something that is taking place.
Issues that come up when web governance is, I'm not sure what your question is.
So,
Ask me again.
how does, you know, good digital governance help support implementation of a WCM system, as well as what are some of the challenges inherent really with establishing digital governance in an organization?
Well, some of the challenges inherent in it, I mean, when you get into an organization of any size, I mean, it doesn't even, can be 10 people, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes 10,000, 40,000, 80,000, it can be distributed globally or whatever. People are going to naturally clump, right? They're going to be working in work groups. And, you know, we negatively refer to those as silos, right? But really, work silos can be really effective. It's just, are they work silos that are integrated in a system, or are they just silos where they're not talking to one another? Mm-hmm. And so governance really ensures that all of those silos are functionally working together. Creating a digital presence, maintaining a digital presence is necessarily a collaborative activity of the organization. No one siloed group is going to be able to do a really good, effective job as that. You know, as soon as I say that, I'm sure there's the instance that, you know, proves
right.
that I'm wrong. Yeah, but in most cases, that's not going to work. So really. You really need to have this in place in order to collaborate effectively and move agilely in the organization.
You talked about before, I know this was maybe 2 years ago, you did a talk on this, so, but I'll set it up. Okay, do you remember what you used to talk about, the phrenology of an organization?
Wendell Wallace Webb,
yes.
WWW, yes.
Yes, so I wonder if you can, because, and we were talking even before, just before the show, and we were saying how when both of us are going in and maybe selling what it is that we do, that one of the most effective ways is if you can identify some of the pain points that resonate with somebody that you're speaking to, right? Somebody that you're trying to sell your services to. And I thought the phrenology of the web that you talked about was a really interesting way that you positioned all of it, that you can just go to a website and see an organization and how discombobulated they are by doing that. And I wonder if you can tell some of those things as like some of the symptoms that folks might see in themselves as well.
Well, yeah, I mean,
so
there's the inside and the outside, right? So I've been talking a lot about the inside, things that you see, the dysfunction, the debate. Right. There's also an external manifestation of that, the most obvious of which is, you know, lots of organizations have websites online, they don't even know they're there, right? The corporate entity doesn't know they're there. They're branded differently,
so often,
right? I mean, it's more often than you would think,
so
right?
Often.
You would think that you ask them for an inventory of their sites and they can't tell you. Or you go online and your experience is you're trying to do one particular task, purchase something, and you're jumped from one application to another, asked for the same information multiple times because there's no integration points.
Yep.
And so you can sort of get an experience from the outside, whether or not it's visual or actually transactional, that things are disjointed internally.
That's right.
Now, some of that is, you know, maturity and the newness of digital. Digital is still relatively new, right? But for most people, it's 15, almost 20 years in since they've had websites. So there really isn't, you know, a reason to kind of finger point and say bad you. As you mentioned, it's a lot of people, a lot of very large, big brands that are struggling with this. The question is, what are you going to do about it, right? Are you going to continue to stumble along, or are you going to actually start to mature? And so I think that's what we're seeing, which is, you know, just as, you know, technology adoption has a kind of a life cycle, there's also this maturity cycle that comes whenever you have to integrate a new technology. And I really think we're at a point where people have to stop and say, look, we just can't work like this anymore.
But here's the thing with that is the parallel that I want to draw to what you do and even what I do is so many times folks are coming to us and they're saying, like, we want to do customer experience management. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not, you can't buy that. Right? I mean, there's, you've got, like, first of all, the parts of your organization don't even all view the customer as the same person, and there's just like so much beyond like technology to that. But the reason I want to say this about what you do is because for those who want to have a good customer experience on their site, which I think everybody ideally wants generally, the point is that even if you're okay for some reason with the back and forth fighting, or you don't think that's getting the point is it reflects externally, right?
That's right. I mean, well, you can't. There's certain sophisticated things where you're integrating and sharing data, or if you're trying to, you have multiple business units and you're trying to sell horizontally across, right?
Yeah.
And surface different products around. You and I know that that takes a certain amount of technology, it takes a content strategy, it takes an integrated approach in order for that to happen. And so that's countercultural for a lot of organizations. And you know, digital is interesting in that way because it's forcing people, right? Because you're creating this integrated artifact that everyone can see. It's forcing organizations that heretofore have been able to be siloed, right? And kind of have their little fiefdoms. They have to figure out a way to work together. And so I think that's really fascinating and leaves us, you know, at an interesting time.
Yeah, the subtext for your book, which I want to ask you about too, but should be, you know, the customer experience mandate is the web governance mandate as well, right? So everybody thinks about like how they're pushing outward again, but I've been saying and screaming, or whether we're talking about enterprise collaboration or whatever, is that you have to have internal appropriate interactions in order to have an external face that's similar and the same to have an experience for your customer that's
and
not disjointed.
One of the things that's interesting, and I'm going to ding those of us who work in digital a little bit on this, is that, you know, it really is against kind of the web culture. So if you think about the history of how the web is manifested, really came from this kind of one woman or one man sitting in a corner, buying a URL, putting up a site, doing the search engine, like you did everything on your own. And so that's sort of the culture of digital. And so you did things quickly, you tried things, you turn over and over again. So this idea of governing, right, is often rejected by the digital team. They think of it as a straitjacket, they think of it as a way to kind of keep tight control over things, but there really becomes a certain point where your digital presence has reached a critical mass where you cannot continue unless you get organized.
That's right.
Right, and so a lot of organizations have reached that point, but the personnel around it haven't reached that point of going, wait, I can no longer fly by the seat of my pants and do whatever I want. I actually have to plan and organize, and that doesn't mean slow. It might mean that you plan to develop an agile environment, right, so that you can keep up the agility. So there are a lot of choices that need to be made, but I think it's really exciting times, and it's, you know, it's great. What we're doing is coming into maturity, and which I think will only mean more power and substance. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Well, one of the things I kind of want to talk about, what about, you know, when we talk about this from within the organization, what about when, you know, we're seeing some, you know, microsites and outposts being developed from a secondary third-party agencies? How do you govern that? Take another step, because I think that's the thing that I kind of think is interesting. It's not underneath your roof. You're trying to say, well, I'm going to sponsor maybe this outpost. I'm going to sponsor this site. How do you govern that in a sense?
So you're talking about when you have external vendors making sites for your organization?
Yes.
Well, that's, you know, when you're structuring your digital team is not just those 5, 15, 25, 30 people in corporate who are the core web team. It's everyone that's in that ecosystem of creation, and that includes external vendors. So, you know, one of the things I like to say is if you have a heavily outsourced model or you have a very distributed model, you actually have to be more stringent about certain governance concerns, one of which is standards, right? So if you have a standards framework that you use, and I kind of liken that to like the W3C. There's certain things that you have to do and certain ways that you have to develop, or it's just not going to push through a web browser, right? It's just not going to work. So you need to establish that kind of mechanism internally, and you need it even more if you have external vendors, and you have to keep them accountable to it, right? So you have to say, yes, you can work with us, but you need to follow this standards-based framework. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And
oftentimes, that's going to be the catalyst, I would imagine, for you realizing that you've got to get this governance under control, because they're asking you to make decisions and all that sort of stuff, and they're like, they've got a project timeline they're trying to adhere to, and you
and that
maybe
goes
can't
back to what you were saying before about multiple sites. I mean, how many failed projects are out there that, well, we have this site, well, because we tried something and it didn't necessarily work, but it's still living under your umbrella.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. There's a lot of that going on. There's you know, a lot of redundant, outdated, trivial content that you see on servers. People are putting things out there. So again, nothing that people should really feel bad about, because it's universal. Right? There are very few people who manage digital well, but it is an opportunity for everybody to kind of pause for a second and line things up and behave in a more mature manner.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, tell us about your book.
Yes, I'm very excited. While I was waiting to come on here, I'm editing fiercely because I promised the manuscript by next week, and it's going to be done. No, I wasn't plotting out. I was just saying, do I want to say this or do I want to say that? Yes, I'm having a book coming out late this summer with Rosenfeld Media. It's called Managing Chaos, Digital Governance by Design.
Nice.
So the whole thrust of it is that just as you design your digital presence and have to make intentional decisions about that, you also have to design the way that you do digital inside your organization. It just can't be an accidental construct that happened because this team popped up over there and this went over there, and so we're going to do it like that forever. Yeah. So there's a way to think about all of these various design components when it comes to your digital team and digital governance and put them together in a way that makes sense for you. So I'm excited about that. It's been a long time coming, and I've learned about what I know about what I do and what I don't know about what I do. But I'm hoping that it'll be a tool for people to use so that they can get some of this work done themselves without having to bring in experts. I'm hoping that it'll educate the community sort of about the field and what digital governance means and help to change some ideas about it not being necessarily about control, right? But it really is about helping an organization become more productive.
I think it's, you've been doing this for a while, and I think you're probably the foremost authority on web governance now, digital governance. And I think it's great to see that, if nothing else, the book hopefully will. Folks didn't know about you unless they were looking. They self-identified they had the problem, and then they went out looking for an answer, and then they'd usually find you. But there's a lot of steps between there and finding you. Yeah. And I think if we can just raise the bar on kind of awareness level is the first major thing that, if you see these symptoms and these things sound familiar to you, then you have a digital governance problem. It's like the first step, right? That's right. And then maybe, do you talk in there about kind of how to get started or how to, those sorts of things?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting. I talk a lot about how to get started and what steps to take, and it really is about clarifying decision making. So, I talk about strategy, policy, standards, and digital team structure. But to some degree, I don't really care what's inside your digital strategy. We just need to make sure that you have one and that you know whose job it is to do it. Same with policy, same with standards. And so that's really kind of the key message. But in terms of getting started and what I would really like to see people doing is, what I was writing before I came in here was, oftentimes I'll go inside an organization, and, we'll do 2 days of discovery, stakeholder interviews, interviews with folks. And someone will say to me, this is the first time we've ever actually all sat in the same room and talked about the website when we weren't fighting about it.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And so I would encourage people to sit down and talk, because the problems are not complicated. What's complicated is the situation and the fact that you have fires coming at you all the time and too much workload and all of these other things. But it's not hard to figure out whose jobs these things are. It can be emotional, it can be stressful, there's politics inside of an organization, but the solution lies, maybe with getting support from somebody like me, but really the solution lies in having a conversation about it, right? And talking about it and talking about the issues are and figuring out what the roles are.
Making conscious choices.
That's right, and being intentional. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Excellent. So, Lisa, in the meanwhile, before the book comes out, where do you want folks to find you right now? So, to that point, Scott, when you say, all right, well, people have recognized that, where can they go to find you?
Well, they can always look at welchmanpeerpoint.com and get in touch with us through there, or they can pick up the phone and call me. I like to talk to people, find out what their issues are. In fact, most people who I talk to say, we need your help, right? they've got an issue.
I'm buying what you're selling, right?
Well, there you go. Exactly right.
And I can see you've done a lot of this past year. You've done a lot of workshops and things. I think.
Yeah, doing workshops. I haven't been speaking much because I've been working on the book. But this fall, I have a fairly heavy speaking load. I'm doing a talk in Edinburgh and one in the Netherlands. So I'll be around the circuit.
Awesome.
Hopefully.
And hopefully we'll have you a digital pulse as well.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. Really good.
Without question, excellent. Lisa, honestly, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to see you guys.
Thank you.
As always, that right there, folks, Lisa Welchman of Welchman Pierpoint. We are going to take a very quick commercial break. We'll be back in just a few moments. We're going to be going in the spotlight as well as, always, rapid fire coming your way in a few seconds here on CMS Connected. Welcome back to CMS Connected here on the Pulse Network. I'm your host, Tyler Piping. Big thanks to Lisa Welchman of Welchman PurePoint taking time out of the day to join us on the show. But it's time for In the Spotlight, and today we're actually going to be reviewing Bridgeline Digital's CMS platform, IApps. Now, Bridgeline Digital, the developer of IApps Web Experience Management Platform. The IApps Product Safe is a SaaS solution that unifies content management, e-commerce, e-marketing, analytics capabilities as well. Since its inception in 2000, Thomas Massey has been Bridgeline Digital's chairman of the board, president, and CEO. Massey has actually led Bridgeline Digital to record revenues each year since inception, and the company has amassed over 75 industry-related awards over the past decade. Joining us via Skype right now to review IApps, the platform, is Brian Ruby from the CMS Report. Brian, welcome back to the show. Has your son developed any other websites within the past 2 months since the last time we talked?
No, he's been too busy with Minecraft.
All right, so fair enough.
He's been busy gaming. Maybe those games are steering him away from web development. I'm not so sure.
Fair enough. All right, so Brian, let's get into Bridgeline and IApps. Kind of give me your overview of IApps.
It's interesting. The marketers and I talked to their CTO, Brett Zucker, and they said, we won't fit in your box. And there is some truth to that. I was going to come online and tell you that it's an all-in-one platform solution versus the best of the breed. But you look at it and you find out that they're a little bit of both. They're an all-in-one solution. They're also look as far as third-party solutions too. Their IApps platform is basically a framework and supports a number of products, and a lot of these products are geared towards web experience management. So they have a content manager, they have a commerce product, and they have a marketing tool to reach audiences called IApps Marketeer, and they also have their own web analytics, which is called the IApps Analyzer. And but at the same time, they're open to third-party integration. So such things as Brightcove and Clay Tablet. Clay Tablet's a translation type package. So you think multi-platforms, and they look at their new user interface, and they're tapping into Dropbox, Gmail, and those type of things. They offer in this world of the cloud, they do offer a software as a solution. But they also still offer a perpetual license, so you could host this application anywhere. You don't have to host it on their servers. And they do have an extensive partnering network. So, you're stumped and you don't know what to do. You're not going to be alone. You have some partners that you can work with. And as far as customers, they've got about 1,000 customers. They have about 5,000 websites out there on the internet that run their platform. And their retention rate is 98%, according to their marketing folks.
Excellent. So that's a lot of different features out there, but which ones in particular, Brian, have seemed to impress you the most that you have gone through?
I know this is all about content management system, but we also know it's a lot more. And I tell you, the thing I'm going to start off is I really was impressed with their web analytics. Their IApps Analyzer is pretty cool. They have it, so it's kind of geared towards goal-driven marketing, and it's also geared towards bringing recommendations and actionable, they call web analytics. And what they mean by that is, these analytics are pretty impressive. And, one of the things is you can build your website and you can guess what your customers want, but the analytics really helps you figure out what the customers are coming to your website for. For example, if they're coming to your front page and they're clicking through 3 or 4 different pages to get to where you want to go, they offer, as far as the analytics, to tell you need to bring that page to your front page. Bring a link right to it. Get your customers happy to get where they need to go. And they call this kind of user segmentation and page segmentation, and it's pretty cool. And it's integrated with their content manager, and that's the cool part about this whole package is it's pretty well thought out for integrating among all its various products. So with the content manager, you do kind of have this audience segmentation where you're not just presenting a website for everybody, you're presenting a website for that particular person coming to your site. And so that's pretty cool. And it can be based on geography, it can be based on how they're coming in from Google or any other search engine, and those type of things. And then there is, of course, in the content manager, the responsive design and looking at dynamic content for the type of equipment and the type of audience you've got. They do have inline editing, inline navigation editing. I know earlier in the show we were talking about the big Drupal controversy about inline editing, But it's great for the experts to not need some of those tools. But for you and me, and for those of us that are just trying to get our content there and we want to contribute, that inline editing stuff is pretty cool. And it's really, I think, becoming more and more necessary when it comes to editing through a tablet. Adobe, OpenText, and also the IApps and BridgeOn, they are kind of focusing on how do we make this easy for you. And you may not be at a desktop. And that's another cool feature with the content manager. Their workflow is also including email. So you're on the road, and a lot of us travel, and you have to publish an article. There's workflow in there, so just you can send it through via email, and also approve it via email.
That's very cool indeed. There's no question about that. So, Brian, one of the things we're hearing right now is a BridgeOn. They market IApps as, quote, web experience management platform. Is that a catchphrase right now, or do you feel like they're for real?
Oh, we sure hear it a lot, don't we, Scott? And I'm sure you're back there somewhere. Yeah, it can be a catchphrase, and that's the scary part, because everybody's claiming they're, whether you want to call it customer experience management, web experience, or digital experience. The scary part is that can kind of cloud, is this a real product for that? And the thing with IApps that I really liked is I asked what the history for this type of platform for them, and it was 6 years ago that they basically realized more of an integrated customer experience solution was needed. And that's important. It's the fact that it's well thought out. And so while that catchphrase might be this year's hype, it's an important word, and it's a word that it seems like BridgeOn has taken seriously, not just this year, but in previous years.
Excellent. So the last question I have for you, and we always kind of wrap it up the same way, who's it for? SMB, enterprise, where does it fall?
Well, I think you're looking at medium to large size businesses and organizations. They do have, as far as some of their customers are like Triumph Motorcycles, and Taylor, those type of sites. But for the larger sites, I think is what you're going to want to. Their competitors seem to be along the lines of Adobe. So it's the larger organizations. But the nice thing is, let's say you're worried about your budget. They do offer their software as a solution platform, so they're SaaS, and so if you're not really ready to make that full commitment, I really urge you to take a look at it and look as far as their cloud solutions, and you might find that it's relatively in your price range.
Excellent, Brian. Honestly, a pleasure as always, my friend, and I'm sure we'll catch up again very soon.
Okay, you take care, and I hope everybody enjoys the warmer weather here in the Northern Hemisphere coming up.
I love it. Brian Ruby, find him at CMS Report. Excellent stuff as always. So, Scott, kind of give us your idea of snapshot of what's going on behind the scenes, BridgeOn.
Yeah, so I mean, not necessarily behind the scenes, but I think so as Brian mentioned, they offer two product types, which is very rare. I'm not actually sure if there's anybody else who offers a completely SaaS-based licensing model, which is subscription, as well as, and I don't just mean in the cloud, but true SaaS, like single, multi-tenant environment, as well as a perpetual license for on-premise or cloud deployment, which is, like I say, extremely rare. How they do it, I'm not exactly sure. Usually it's completely different mindsets, even from a development standpoint, but they do that. They also approach things, BridgeOn is a very different company from the stance that they have scaled by actually acquiring other these interactive agencies. So here where we talk about the kind of where technology meets integration and implementation, and how important that is, and how I've said for years how it's so important that you evaluate your implementer or your agency as much, if not more so, than the technology you're going to buy. That they have grown and acquired by actually growing the size of their organization through the interactive agencies that they pick up. And so basically they do they do have some partners, but for the most part, they deliver their own services. But not just like a typical WCM company offers a professional services just to do implementation. These guys are full service offering because they actually are a collection of a bunch of interactive agencies that have creative and all these other skill sets.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's a really interesting meld, but now all they're doing is actually focusing on one product they're using as their platform. So they were standalone design agencies and interactive agencies that might have been working with a number of platforms and products, and oh, by the way, might still, in some small cases, have some work with some old legacy projects on other applications, but they're funneling everything over to the IApps platform. So they are both a product and a services company, which is
all on the same
interesting.
Right. Interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right, that right there, folks, was your In the Spotlight segment. It's time to go ahead and move on. We've got our last segment. As always, the favorite for a lot of folks out there is Rapid Fire. We put a couple minutes up on the clock. Let's kind of rattle through some of the different items throughout the past month that we wanted to touch upon today. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to kick things off by talking about autonomy. After months of accusation of counter-accusation, there is finally some movement on the HP Autonomy legal contest with a complaint being officially filed. However, the story took another twist last week as SAP claims that HP tried to offload Autonomy on it. SAP, it seems, politely refused. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is interesting because here we have them in the news again, and it's not good news. In this case, we've got SAP's co-CEO, Bill McDermott, who said in an interview with the Times of London that before Meg Whitman came aboard at HP, that basically the autonomy was being shopped to them. And of course, HP completely denies this. They said that, in fact, it was the other way around, that they were courted by SAP. But regardless of what happened, I think that, HP has to be completely behind autonomy right now for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I think they're basically denying all of these claims because we know that they made a lot of wind in the past year about how they were going to go after autonomy because they were sold a bill of goods on the $11 billion valuation that they gave and purchase price that they made for autonomy. They've gotten a lot of heat over that. First of all, they drew everybody's attention to that themselves by going out in the press. And it wasn't even through the course of a lawsuit. They actually went after them in the press. And so now they're getting lawsuits filed on them constantly. And I wasn't watching the time, and I completely forgot how fast this needed to be. So short story is they're getting a lot of, they're fending off in a lot of sticks, even from those that they've kind of created themselves, to be honest.
All right. Excellent.
Wow, that was, okay, can we do that one again? No, that's live TV. Here we go.
That's the way it works for us. We have a little fun. All right, so let's move on to Sitecore. And I'll be brief, so I'll give you a little extra. Let's talk about Sitecore 7.
Yep.
It was just released. Your thoughts on the new platform?
Sure. Very cool. So I like the new Sitecore 7, although it's been in the works for a long time. I actually reviewed it months and months ago now, and it's just gone GA. They called it massive because it was a pretty significant underlying re-architecture change to be able to scale and to do things like it's very search enabled now. So search is at its root and at its prime, right? And so that's going to allow us to have them to have content, in the right place at the right time for the right user, all that sort of stuff. So engagement, of course, being key for Sitecore. The other thing, though, that I was actually just speaking with somebody when I was in Portland earlier this week, and they were a developer and integrator with them, and they basically said they were impressed at how much of the new release was focused on making their lives easier. That from a developer standpoint, that they actually found the new version of the platform that they've beefed up an awful lot of the capabilities for them to make it easier to integrate and implement. Something that, frankly, Sitecore has gotten a fair amount of been beaten up about, that how much it takes to implement their solution. So I think I really like it, and it seems like the integrator community likes it too.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about HubSpot. Interesting spot in their company's history. Just last year, company did over $50 million in sale, and now it's up to over 450 employees, but it's still not clear what the direction the company itself is going in. Scott, what do you think they are? They, small business online marketplace, data provider, enterprise software. Where are they going? What are your thoughts on HubSpot?
Yeah, so this was the catalyst for us discussing this was they had a kind of influencer day not so long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and DCG's Alan Bondi was there, and he wrote up some thoughts on our blog about it, and basically he's pretty bullish on HubSpot. I mean, he definitely likes what they're doing and where they're going, but I think he draws some points that should be pointed out, which is it's not really clear exactly where they are going necessarily, because we hear them making all types of noise around trying to be more and more in the enterprise and trying to be oriented more and more towards the kind of the large enterprise player, and they're developing that enterprise positioning. But really, they've gotten most of their traction through small businesses and medium-sized businesses, and helping them with their inbound marketing challenges. I think there's an awful lot of room still to grow in that place, and Alan says the same thing. So it's interesting to see where they're going to take this exactly. Should you just kind of double double down on the enterprise and on the small enterprise, or are they going to really make big waves with maybe an integration or some more partnerships to get themselves positioned in the larger enterprise?
Okay, so the next story we want to go ahead and jump upon is Yahoo and Tumblr. You guys have all heard the news about this coming up lately. $1.1 billion, a pretty penny. Given Yahoo's kind of checkered past, what do you make of the acquisition?
It's hard. Listen, I don't follow Yahoo traditionally, but I know that Marissa Mayer is there as the new CEO, and she's just trying to get them to be relevant and in the news, because they were on the slide for an awful long time. Making a splash acquisition of a $1 billion plus acquisition, number one, and an acquisition of Tumblr specifically, too, is going to get you in the news and get you talked about. I think what they're also trying to do is shift their audience a little bit. It was viewed as kind of an older platform and for older folks, and Tumblr's obviously, some have joked, that it's all 13-year-old girls that are on it. I'm not so sure that that's exactly true, but nonetheless, it certainly does get them in the areas of kind of being better viewed by the eyes of the younger audience and the younger crowd. I think bigger and important, and a point that Ron Miller from Fierce made in an article was about, this is really about content, really. And Tumblr was all about content, creating content, and so the more that Yahoo is at the pulse of that, about content creation, then it's going to be in a better position.
All right, well, let's talk about Robert Rose, because he actually recently shared a post of how CMOs might actually derive value from big data at CMS Expo in Chicago last week, and it was called Big Data: Extracting Value from a Big Box of Nonsense.
And we've had this discussion a couple of times now about big data. Listen, I'm not and neither is DCG, an anti-big data group. It's just that we tend to like to come at this thing from the pragmatic sense. And the point is that big data is first and foremost mostly targeted towards really, really large enterprises, or those who have massive amounts of data. The point that Robert makes, though, is kind of less about big data and how it's defined, and more about just data in general and how can you make good use of it in a pragmatic sense. What he talks about is a new role cropping up, which he's calling the manager of meaning, but it might take a number of forms. So basically, the person who's going to be able to make sense of this information, that last mile, or what Alan Bondi, who's on the team as well, is doing a research study called about small data, which is all about how do you take the kind of the last mile of big data. We know that you can assemble an awful lot of it. How can you get meaning out of it, and how can you infer it to how you should change your practices day to day to actually be able to realize some value? So he calls that the manager of meaning. Interesting new role. We're going to write a lot about more about it in the future.
Very cool. So talking about new things, the last thing I'm going to talk about is the new Digital Pulse. Explain this to me a bit more. I actually know a lot about it, but you keep giving it to me.
You do know a lot about it because we both have a fair stake in this. So Digital Clarity Group, in combination with the Pulse Network, who produces this show, have created a new conference called the Digital Pulse, and it's going to be October 16th and 17th in Boston, Massachusetts, where we're filming now. The target audience, really, it is going to be all about what we've talked about, kind of in a theme today, about this notion of customer experience, and both for the marketer, when we're talking about focusing externally on your audience of customers and prospects, as well as internally your audience of engaging your employees. And so we're really going to try to do something a little bit different here. We're combining also with IMS, which always has a great track record and was focused. We're going to kind of locate with that. And I think we're going to have a lot of really good speakers doing some things like some pragmatic, here's how it works in the real world, as well as some TED-like talks that are kind of like inspirational, here's how we should be striving towards. So it should be really great.
Love it. I was going to say, I've been able to see some of the programming kind of come together.
Yeah.
Definitely looking interesting, and I promise you will not want to miss out on it. It's going to be an excellent
It will be the
combination
conference of the year.
Different events,
Seriously.
speakers, everything, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Scott, that will basically do it for today's show. Good show as always, huh?
It was. I felt a little off today, but it was a good show nonetheless. I had a lot of fun, and Lisa is an awesome guest.
Lisa's awesome.
Always.
There's
so
no question about
really
that.
good.
And Lisa can come back any time she wants. She's awesome.
For sure.
No question about that. All right, so that's going to do it for us today here on CMS Connected. Our next show in June, all about web personalization with a spotlight feature on OpenText and the rebirth of the Vignette platform. So make sure, mark your calendars, stay tuned for that. It should be excellent. Finally, I'd like to thank both of our sponsors who make this show happen, Falcon Software, as well as Digital Clarity Group. And of course, on behalf of my co-host, Scott Lewer, I'm Tyler Popper of the Pulse Network. You are watching CMS Connected here on the Pulse Network. We'll see you guys next time.